They say a mother's heart is the strongest thing in the world. But no one tells you what it feels like when that heart breaks because of your own child. Just die. I don't care. Those weren't just words, they were a sentence. A final blow. A moment that divided my life into two parts, before that day and after it. Tell me something. How do you respond when the person you sacrificed everything for looks at you like you mean nothing? Because I didn't respond. I froze. Not outside, inside. Because in that moment, I wasn't just hearing his voice. I was hearing the truth I had been avoiding for years. And the truth was simple, painful, clear. I had given everything to someone who never learned how to value it. I stood there, looking at him, trying to recognize the face I once loved more than anything. But all I saw was distance, coldness, disrespect, and the hardest part? It didn't happen overnight. This wasn't one moment, one argument, one bad day. This was a pattern, a slow change. A quiet transformation that I kept ignoring because I believed, he's my son. He'll never truly hurt me. But life has a way of teaching you lessons you never thought you'd need. And this was mine. Let me take you back, because stories like this don't start with pain. They start with love. I remember when he was young. The way he used to hold my hand. The way he used to call my name. The way he used to look at me. Like I was his entire world. I built my life around that love. Every decision. Every sacrifice. Every choice. It was all for him. I didn't think about myself. I didn't ask for anything in return. Because that's what mothers do. We give. We protect. We sacrifice. And we believe that love will come back to us. But sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, you're left questioning everything. When did things change? Was it when he grew up? Was it when life got harder? Was it when I gave too much? Or was it always there and I just didn't see it? These questions stayed in my mind. Over and over. But one thing became clear: this didn't happen in one day. It started with small things. Disrespectful tone. A careless response. A lack of gratitude. Things I ignored, things I excused, things I justified. Because I didn't want conflict. I wanted peace. But here's the truth: peace without respect is not peace. It's silence, and silence can slowly destroy you. Then came the debts. Problems, pressure, stress. He came to me, not with humility, not with regret, but with expectation. Fix it. And I did. Without hesitation, without questions. I paid everything. Every bill. Every loan. Every mistake. Because I thought, this is what love looks like. I thought, if I help him now, he'll understand later. If I support him now, he'll respect me later. But life doesn't reward blind sacrifice. It teaches you balance. And I had none. I gave everything. And in return, I got nothing. No thank you. No appreciation. No change. Just more distance, more coldness, more silence. Tell me, how long can you keep giving when nothing comes back? Because eventually you run out. Not of money. Of strength. Of patience. Of hope. And that's where I was. Empty. Not physically, emotionally. Still giving but feeling nothing in return. And then that day came. The argument, the moment, the truth. I didn't even raise my voice. I just asked for something simple: respect. After everything I had done, I thought I deserved that. But instead I got those words. Just die. I don't care. Let that sink in. Because sometimes it only takes one sentence to reveal everything. That wasn't anger. That wasn't frustration. That was truth. And truth doesn't lie. In that moment I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. Because for the first time, I stopped seeing him as who he used to be, and started seeing him as who he had become. And that realization, it changes you. Because once you see the truth, you can't go back to pretending. He told me to leave. And this time I didn't stay. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I walked away. Not because I was weak, but because I was finally strong enough to choose myself. That night I sat alone. No noise. No distractions. Just me and my thoughts. And for the first time in years I asked myself something honest: why did I allow this? And the answer was hard to accept. Because I loved him more than I respected myself. And that was my mistake. But mistakes are lessons. And lessons change you. That night I made a promise. A quiet promise. I will never abandon myself again. Simple words, but powerful. Because everything changed after that. Backhand index pointing right. If you're still here, type I choose myself in the comments, because the moment you choose yourself is the moment your life begins to change. And trust me, what I did next, no one saw coming. The next morning, I didn't cry. And that scared me more than anything. Because for the first time, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no urge to go back. Just silence inside me. Tell me, have you ever been hurt so deeply that even your emotions give up? That's where I was. Not broken. Empty. And sometimes emptiness is more dangerous than pain. Because pain can push you to react. But emptiness, it forces you to reflect. I sat there, staring at the same walls, thinking about everything that led me to this moment. Every sacrifice. Every excuse. Every time I chose him over myself. And for the first time, I wasn't just remembering. I was understanding. Understanding how slowly I disappeared from my own life. Because when you keep putting someone else first, you don't just lose time. You lose yourself. I got up, looked in the mirror. And for a second, I didn't recognize the person staring back at me. Not physically, but emotionally. Because the woman I saw was tired. Not from work. Not from life. But from giving too much to someone who gave nothing back. And in that moment, I asked myself a question that changed everything. What do I do now? Because walking away is just the beginning. The real challenge is what comes after. Do you go back? Do you forgive again? Do you pretend nothing happened? Or do you finally choose yourself? That decision defines your future. And I knew one thing, going back was no longer an option. Not because I hated him, but because I finally respected myself. That day, I didn't call anyone, I didn't share my story, I didn't look for sympathy. Because I wasn't looking for comfort. I was looking for clarity. And clarity comes in silence. Hours passed. And slowly my thoughts became sharper, clearer, stronger. I started seeing things differently. Not as a victim, but as someone who allowed too much. And that shift? It's powerful. Because the moment you stop blaming others and start taking responsibility for your choices, you take your power back. I thought about the money. Every cent I gave. Every sacrifice I made. Not with anger, but with awareness. Because I realized something important, it wasn't just about money. It was about boundaries, and I had none. I gave without limits, helped without conditions, stayed without questioning. And when you live like that, people don't see your value. They see your availability. Let that sink in. Because many people don't lose respect suddenly. They lose it slowly by always being available, always saying yes, always sacrificing themselves. And I had done exactly that. But not anymore. Something inside me had changed. Something stronger, something sharper. A new mindset. I will not allow this again. Simple words, but they carry power. Because that's where transformation begins. Not outside, inside. Days passed, and I started rebuilding. Not my life first, my thinking. Because your mindset creates your reality. I stopped seeing myself as someone who was hurt, and started seeing myself as someone who learned. And learning, it's growth. I started making decisions differently, small ones at first. Choosing peace over chaos. Choosing silence over arguments. Choosing distance over disrespect. And slowly, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: control. Not over others, over myself. And that's real power. Then one day a thought came to my mind. Not emotional, not reactive. Strategic. I want my money back. And for the first time, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like justice. Because I realized if I let this go, I'm not being kind. I'm being careless with my own worth. And I had already done that for too long. So I made a decision. Calmly, clearly. I would take back what was mine. Not with anger. Not with drama. But with intelligence. Because when emotions step back, strategy steps in. And strategy wins. That day, I didn't act immediately. I planned. Because this wasn't about proving a point. It was about setting a standard. A standard for myself. That I will no longer accept loss in the name of love. Tell me, how many times have you sacrificed yourself just to keep someone else comfortable? And what did it cost you? Your peace, your dignity, your identity. Because for me it cost all of that. But not anymore. This time things would be different. This time I would choose myself. And what I did next, no one expected. Not him. Not anyone. Backhand index pointing right. If you're still watching, type I choose boundaries in the comments, because the moment you set boundaries is the moment your life begins to change. And trust me, what happened next wasn't just unexpected. It was powerful. There's a moment when pain stops controlling you and something else takes over. Clarity. Cold, calm, unshakable clarity. That's where I was. Not emotional, not reactive, focused, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't thinking like a mother. I was thinking like someone who finally understood her own worth. Tell me, have you ever reached a point where you stop asking why me and start asking what now? Because that question changes everything. What now? Not what they did, not what they said, but what I do next. And in that moment I made a decision. I will take back control. Not loudly, not aggressively, but intelligently. Because here's something I learned the hard way: emotion reacts, but strategy wins. I sat down that day and started going through everything. Every payment, every bill, every transfer, every time I helped, every time I covered his mistakes. And as I looked at the numbers, something became clear. This wasn't small. This wasn't just help. This was everything I had built over years, and I gave it away thinking it would bring us closer. But instead it pushed me further away. That realization didn't make me angry. It made me precise. Because now I wasn't guessing anymore. I knew exactly what I had lost, and more importantly, I knew exactly what I deserved back. Days passed and I continued preparing, quietly. No one knew what I was planning. No one saw the shift inside me. Because real transformation is silent. It doesn't announce. Itself. It doesn't seek attention. It just happens. I started reaching out. Not emotionally, professionally. Asking questions, understanding options, learning what I could do. Because this time, I wasn't acting from pain. I was acting from power, and power is built on knowledge. The more I learned, the more confident I became. Because I realized something important: I wasn't powerless. I had just been passive. There's a difference. Powerless means you have no options. Passive means you're choosing not to use them. And I had been passive for too long. But not anymore. This time I would act. Carefully, strategically. Without noise, without emotion. Just results. Tell me, how many times have you stayed silent when you actually had the power to act? How many times did you think, it's okay, let it go? When deep down you knew it wasn't okay. Because I had done that my entire life. But this time, I chose differently. I gathered everything: documents, proof, records. Every detail that showed what I had given. Not to prove anything to him, but to stand firm for myself. Because when you respect yourself, you don't ignore what's yours. You protect it. Weeks passed, and step by step, everything started coming together. Not perfectly, but clearly. I wasn't rushing. Because I understood something: fast decisions come from emotion. Strong decisions come from patience. And I wanted strength. During this time, I didn't contact him. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. Because I didn't need closure from him. I had already found it within myself. And that's powerful. Because when you don't need validation, you become unstoppable. Then one day everything was ready. Every step planned. Every move clear. And for a moment I paused. Not because I was unsure, but because I realized this is the point of no return. Once I do this, everything changes. Not just for him. For me, because I was no longer the same person. The woman who tolerated everything was gone. The woman who stayed silent was gone. In her place was someone new. Stronger, smarter, unshakable. And that version of me? She doesn't accept disrespect. She doesn't ignore injustice. She doesn't abandon herself. I took a deep breath and said something quietly. This is for me. Not revenge. Respect. And that difference, it matters. Because revenge is emotional. Respect is intentional. That day I made my move. Calmly. Precisely. And what happened next changed everything. Not just the situation, but my entire life. Backhand index pointing right. If you're still watching, type I take my power back in the comments, because the moment you take your power back is the moment everything shifts. And trust me, what happened next, he never saw coming. The moment I took action, everything shifted. Not outside, inside me. Because for the first time, I wasn't reacting to pain. I was responding with power. Tell me something, have you ever made a decision that scared you, but at the same time made you feel stronger than ever before? That's exactly how I felt. Calm, focused, unshaken. Because I knew one thing this time, I wasn't doing this for anyone else. I was doing it for me. For my dignity. For my peace. For my self-respect. And that changes everything. I didn't call him. I didn't warn him. I didn't argue. Because I had learned something powerful. You don't announce your moves when you're finally choosing yourself. You act. Quietly. Strategically. And that's exactly what I did. Every step I had planned, I followed it. Carefully. No emotions. No hesitation. Just clarity. Days passed and slowly things started unfolding. Not loudly, but effectively. Because when your foundation is strong, results follow. Then one day it happened. The call. I saw his name on my phone. For a second I just looked at it. Not with fear. Not with anxiety. But with awareness. Because I knew this wasn't the same dynamic anymore. This wasn't the same relationship anymore. And most importantly, I wasn't the same person anymore. I answered. Silence on the other side. Then his voice. Confused. What is this? Short, simple, but filled with something I hadn't heard in a long time, uncertainty. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. The same confusion I lived in for years was now his reality. And that wasn't revenge. That was balance. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain everything. I just said one thing. I'm taking back what's mine. Silence. Because sometimes simple words carry the most power. He tried to speak, tried to justify, tried to explain. But this time, I didn't listen the same way, because when you finally see the truth, excuses lose their meaning. I wasn't emotional. I was clear. And clarity is unshakable. Tell me, how many times have you listened to excuses just because you didn't want to face the truth? How many times have you accepted words that didn't match actions? Because I had done that for years. But not anymore. This time I chose reality. And reality doesn't lie. The process continued. Step by step. And slowly everything started returning. Not instantly. But surely. Because when you stand firm, life responds. And with every step, I didn't just regain money. I regained something more important, my power. My voice. My identity. Because this was never just about money. It was about the version of me that I had lost. And now I was finding her again. Stronger, wiser, unbreakable. Time passed and things settled. Not perfectly, but peacefully, because peace doesn't come from fixing everything. It comes from choosing what you allow. And I had changed what I allow. I no longer accepted disrespect. I no longer tolerated being used. I no longer stayed silent to keep peace. Because real peace comes from self-respect. One evening, I sat alone just thinking. Not about the past, but about the journey. From pain to clarity, from confusion to control. And I realized something. This wasn't the end. This was a beginning. A new chapter. A new life. A new version of me. And that version, she doesn't beg for respect. She doesn't chase love. She doesn't ignore red flags. She chooses herself. Every time. Tell me, what would your life look like if you started choosing yourself? If you stopped settling, if you stopped tolerating, if you stopped giving more than you receive? Because that one shift changes everything. That night, I smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because I was finally free. Free from expectations, free from attachment, free from the need to prove anything. And that freedom? It's priceless. Backhand index pointing right. If you're still watching, type, I choose my power in the comments. Because the moment you choose your power is the moment your life transforms. And trust me, what happened next was something I never expected. Because the final lesson was still waiting for me. The truth is, getting everything back didn't change me the way I thought it would. Not the money, not the situation. Because the real change had already happened inside me. Tell me something, what do you think matters more? Getting back what you lost, or becoming someone who will never lose themselves again? Because I learned this the hard way. You can lose money and earn it back. But if you lose yourself, you lose everything. And for years that's exactly what I had done. I lost myself, in the name of love and the name of sacrifice and the name of being there, for someone who was never truly there for me. But now, that version of me was gone. And in her place was someone new. Someone who understands boundaries, someone who values peace, someone who knows when to give and when to walk away. Days passed and life became quieter. Not lonely, peaceful, because there's a difference. Lonely is when you feel empty. Peaceful is when you feel complete. And for the first time in a long time, I felt complete. Not because everything was perfect, but because I was no longer fighting myself. I had nothing to prove, nothing to chase, nothing to fix, just a life to live. On my terms. One morning, I sat by the window holding a cup of coffee watching the sunlight come in. And I realized something simple but powerful: peace is not something you find. It's something you create. By what you allow. By what you walk away from. By what you choose to keep in your life. And I had finally learned how to create it. Then one day another message came. From him. Not angry, not demanding. Different. I'm sorry. 2 words. Words I had waited for so long. And now that they were here, they didn't feel the same. Because I had changed. I read the message and for a moment, I just sat there. Not rushing to reply, not feeling emotional. Just observing. Because this time I wasn't reacting from old habits. I was responding from a new mindset. Tell me, how many times have you waited for an apology, thinking it would heal everything? But when it finally comes, you realize you already healed without it. That's growth, I replied. Not with anger. Not with blame. Just truth. I hope you learn from this. That's it. Because I didn't need to reopen old wounds. I didn't need to explain my pain. I didn't need closure from him anymore. I already had it. And that's the highest level of strength, when you no longer need anything from the person who once hurt you. Life moved on. And so did I. But this time with awareness, with boundaries, with a deep understanding of my own value. And that understanding protects you from repeating the same mistakes, from losing yourself again, from accepting less than you deserve. If you're listening to this right now, I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself, where in my life am I giving too much and receiving too little? Because that's where your power is leaking. That's where your peace is being stolen. And that's where your change needs to begin. You don't need to wait for someone to hurt you again. You don't need a breaking point. You just need awareness and the courage to act on it. Because your life doesn't change when others change. It changes when you do. So choose yourself, choose your peace, choose your respect. Every single time. Because at the end of the day, no one will protect your peace better than you. Backhand index pointing right. If this story touched you, type I choose myself in the comments, because that one decision can change everything. And if you want more real, powerful stories like this, stories that don't just motivate you, but transform the way you think, make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell. Because here we don't just tell stories. We change mindsets. We build strength. And we remind you of something you should never forget: you are valuable. You are worthy. And you deserve a life where you are respected. So walk away from what breaks you. Stand firm in what builds you. And never forget, the moment you choose yourself is the moment your real life begins. Stay strong, stay wise, and I'll see you in the next story.